I may be stupid. I may be a big dumb baby because today I'm tackling a topic that's a lot bigger than anything I've talked about on the show before. It's the lobster to the crabs we've been fighting, if you will. To properly talk about Taiwan's border claims and why they're actually really weird and dumb is all well and good, but you kind of need more background knowledge than the entire 40K universe. Taiwan's got a lot of weird territorial quirks, but none of them can be explained away without a Wikipedia rabbit hole and a general knowledge of the Taiwan and China situation. A knowledge that goes beyond what a random Reddit user told you in the comment section of a post that points out you can replace Winnie the Pooh with Winnie the Flu and be extremely funny, popular, handsome, and have sex with every girl. So buckle in, kids, because in order to talk about the initial concept of this video, i.e., hey, isn't it funny that Taiwan claims these random Russian villages as its own territory, I need to give a history lesson of all this, starting from about a century ago. Let's get going. Meet the Qing dynasty. It's China from the 1600s to the 1900s. This is the last dynasty of China before modern times, and the history is complicated. The dynasty was plagued with issues from the very beginning, in addition to getting dicked around by colonizers at every turn. This is because the dynasty was both big and weak, and as we all know, big country plus weak government equals Balkans. You don't want to be Balkans. There were a lot of rebellions to stop the spread of colonialism, and we'll get back to the Boxer Rebellion in particular, but for now we're just going to leave it at the Chinese people being very unhappy with things. The British Empire had gifted strategic opium to make sure the Qing people were hooked before agreeing to supply them with more in exchange for key ports. Despite this, the Qing dynasty held a lot of cultural significance. There's nothing weak governments like more than needless extravagance, as America will tell you, so ass tons of huge sculptures and temples littered the land from their exploits, as well as anything that they'd inherited from the thousands of years of Chinese history before them. Unfortunately for the Qings, giant statues only got them so far, and their dynasty fell into disarray around the 1910s, individual provinces taking their chance to hop on board the train of independence. In 1912, the Qing dynasty got a facelift and became officially known as the Republic of China, claiming all their old territory but only really controlling half of it. Hong Kong and Macau had already been slurped into the British Empire, Tibet jumped ship as soon as it could, Mongolia vanished into the night, never to return, and Xinjiang was still technically under their control but really wasn't happy about it. India, Myanmar, and Bhutan, of all places, had also taken chunks that held majority populations of theirs, so the Republic wasn't doing so hot. Then Japan happened. The Sino-Japanese War was actually the second war between the two. I won't get into the first Sino-Japanese War, but it resulted in the cession of a funny little island called Taipei and a funny little peninsula called Korea to Japan a couple decades earlier. The second one was a lot more brutal. Imperial Japan struck hard and fast, taking all of Manchuria and a good chunk of China proper. The Second War was eventually put to stop by the US and their Great Balls of Fire, but the damage to the ROC's image was irreversible. The post-war conditions were bad, real bad. Rent was through the roof, people were starving, and all the government seemed to care about was failing to throw more bombs at Japan. Since most of the army had died fighting off the Japanese, a certain Mao Zedong decided to just fucking go for it and launch an attack. He had some interesting ideas about landlords that the government wasn't really a fan of, but the ROC lost the fight in just 4 years, retreating to the funny little island that the Japanese had ceded back to them at the end of World War II. This is where the modern concept of China and Taiwan originates, but there's a bit more to it than that. The PRC and ROC have competing ideologies, one funded by the Soviet Union and one funded by the USA. The PRC used to be decidedly communist, anti-religious, and extremely nationalistic. After Mao died, they pretty much dropped the first one because, money. They can have as many hammers and sickles as they want, but if I can shop at a communist Gucci store with a communist indentured servant to hold my suits and then get lunch at a communist McDonald's drive-thru afterwards, I think the word's gotten lost in translation somewhere. The ROC, on the other hand, started off as bad. The Kuomintang Party, the ruling party of Taiwan, had gotten bit before by letting other people do politics, so anyone who opposed the party tended to disappear. They even had their own Tiananmen Square massacre. Their ideology was state capitalism before the PRC did it, and of course the US signed off on it. In the 80s, they chilled out a fair bit and ended martial law, which may or may not have had something to do with the UN recognizing the PRC instead of them a decade earlier. Nowadays, they've moved towards making Taiwan itself an economic superpower instead of trying to take back the land they've lost, and they're doing a great job at it. There's still the stalemate of the PRC not recognizing them as their own country, but everybody knows they're happy being their own little island now. Except the Taiwanese government. They sure as fuck don't. So here's the deal. China claims that Taiwan is part of its territory but ruled by a rebel government. They don't do anything about this because they realize invasion would spark an international incident, and the current stalemate doesn't really affect them in any negative way. Claiming Taiwan gives them a little boost to their economic zone, and that's about it. Taiwan, on the other hand, claims everything that the Qing dynasty has ever owned as part of its territory. Supposedly, this is to look strong and shit, but come on, look at it. You want to see how many territorial disputes Taiwan has? You want to see how far this shit goes? We're gonna talk about all of them. I'm gonna start by hand-waving the mainland China claim. It's a bit silly on paper, but I understand it. Since China refuses formal agreements with governments that recognize Taiwan, it makes sense for them to claim the mainland for the sake of the fishing rights. Since it's in a state of limbo where any attacks on Taiwanese or Chinese ships would spark an international incident, both of them can fish and transport along each other's coastlines without hassle. It makes enough sense. What doesn't make sense is this garbage in the South China Sea. In 1975, China took a look at the uninhabited islands in the South China Sea and got an idea. The idea was mine. China bumped into Vietnam's exclusive economic zone to take control of the Paracel Islands and Macclesfield Bank before dipping down into everybody's exclusive economic zone to take control of the Spratly Islands. The Spratly Islands are stupid and bad, and I'll get into them in a minute, but Taiwan immediately jumped on the bandwagon by claiming all of these at the same time. These islands were never part of the Qing dynasty, but Taiwan wants them anyway because fishing is cool, and if they were to spontaneously regain control of the mainland, they would also not give a shit about Vietnam. By the way, Macclesfield Bank is quite literally underwater. It has never, in the history of the world, not been underwater, and that's extremely against the UN's mandates to claim land, but if you think the UN actually does anything, you should go outside sometime. Also, rewind the video and replace 1975 with 2012 for the Chinese annexation of Scarborough Shoal as well, and replace Vietnam with the Philippines. You bet your ass Taiwan claimed that too. The Spratly Islands are the worst place on Earth. They suck. They're terrible. I hate them. Vietnam claims some of them. Brunei claims some of them. Malaysia claims some of them. The Philippines claims some of them. Taiwan and China both claim them all. There are military bases on nearly every island from those 6 countries, and guess fucking what? Nobody lives on these islands either. They're a hotbed of military activity because you can't sail for 5 minutes without stepping on another country's toes. I can't really blame Taiwan for claiming these because honestly, if I was a country, I'd claim them too, just for shits and giggles. Let's move upward to the Senkaku Islands, administered by Japan but claimed by Taiwan and China both. After World War II, the US had control over the islands, along with the rest of the Pacific really, but decided to give the islands back to Japan in the 70s. China and Taiwan, both never missing a beat to fish better, claimed the islands the frame the US let go of them and transferred control back to Okinawa Prefecture. Does anybody in Japan actually care about this annexation? No, because the islands again have no inhabitants and exist for the sole purpose of pissing contests between countries. They do have some rare albatrosses on them though. Maybe give them the islands, UN. This brings us to the last coastal claim Taiwan and China both make, and it's a doozy. It's Hong Kong. They both claim Hong Kong. Well, in the Qing dynasty, the British Empire made a deal to lease out Hong Kong for 100 years and then give it back to China after that, with the impression being that they'd never actually collect on it because the Qing dynasty would be too hopped up on opium to take it back. When the PRC came knocking for Hong Kong in 1997, the year the contract was up, it was an international upset. At the same time as all that unrest, the president of Taiwan stood up from his chair, looked out the window solemnly, and uttered yet another, "No, it's ours, really, please," and then sat back down. This is a general theme. If China claims something, Taiwan will do the same, whether or not it makes any sense. People will tell you that if they didn't do this, China would view it as a sign of submission and invade. These people are stupid baby morons whose family trees look like spider webs. These people are Redditors. So yeah, Taiwan has formal claims on anything that China has annexed or is in the process of annexing, including Arunachal Pradesh in India, the northern part of the Kachin state in Myanmar, parts of the Doklam region in Bhutan, Kulakangri, also in Bhutan, and Eskai Chin in the Kashmir region, which I'm not even going to touch in this video because it's long enough already. Plus, if you even say the words Jammu and Kashmir in a YouTube video, your comment section will immediately fill with angry people speaking in Moon Hex. You would think that, with Taiwan's attitudes towards the PRC's imperialism, they wouldn't ditto the PRC's claimed territory, but I'm pretty sure at this point Taiwan recognizes that its territorial claims are goofy and that it needs to be rewritten entirely sometime. It's kinda like how the Alabama Constitution still has stuff about what you can and cannot do with your slaves. From here on out, we're all inland, and we've got a very special two regions that Taiwan claims as part of its territory, sort of, Tibet and Xinjiang. These were both part of the Qing dynasty, so it makes sense for Taiwan to claim them, right? Same reason China proper claims them, right? Well, here's where things get a bit funky. The Taiwanese government has, on multiple occasions, voiced support for an independent Tibet, or at least a fully autonomous one rather than the puppet state it is now, which is fucking weird to say while also claiming your own sovereignty over that region. It's the same for Xinjiang, except that Taiwan actually kept its own diaspora government for the Xinjiang region running in Taipei for 50 years after they got ran out of the mainland. 50 years. It was dissolved in 1992, but they still claim that region as their own on paper. You know, Taiwan, I won a spelling bee when I was in elementary school and I called myself Word Jesus until I got sent to in-school suspension for blasphemy, but it might be weird for me to still call myself that 4 years into my bachelor's degree. Let's head up north now to Mongolia, specifically Outer Mongolia, the country, as opposed to Inner Mongolia, the not country. Yes, it's confusing, but if my dad can understand the distinction after 5 tries, I figure you'll pick it up as I go along. Did you know that Mongolia declared independence immediately after the Qing dynasty fell? Cool, right? Good for them. I'm happy for them. Why does Taiwan still claim them? This isn't even claimed by the PRC. The PRC has never claimed Outer Mongolia. Taiwan, what the fuck are you doing? This was actually a massive point of contention for the Kuomintang government. While they were still in the UN, Taiwan vetoed Mongolia from joining, even as the PRC recognized their sovereignty. The only reason Mongolia got in the 60s was because the UR greased some palms to get Mauritania added to the country list, and Mongolia grabbed on like a tick and wouldn't let go until the USSR gave enough of a stink eye at Taiwan to get them to relent. Taiwan didn't even require Mongolians to get a visa until the 2000s, which was supposed to be a show of ownership, but wound up more like letting someone take your wallet to show them how cool the leatherwork is. Taiwan even had laws specifically for Mongolia until 2006, detailing where monasteries could be built. Of course, nobody in Mongolia gave a shit, but it's really, really funny. I feel like I'm catching a kid with their hand in a cookie jar whenever I see Taiwan having laws for other countries in their legislature. Make me president of Taiwan and I'll ban smoking in Denmark. Let's talk about some former border disputes that Taiwan hasn't bothered to update. The dividing line between North Korea and China's sides of Baekdu Mountain was contentious until 1962. Taiwan hasn't updated the claim, and guess what? South Korea also claims Baekdu Mountain, so Taiwan's claims intersect with both Koreas. Fun. The meme map that I'm basing this off of says the Tumen River is a bit of a contentious spot, but the only point of argument there is where in the river the dividing line is. You would think that it wouldn't matter, but the Tumen River is a hot spot for North Koreans looking to make a break for it, so where in the river they get shot would be important to note if China cared enough to prosecute that kind of thing. An entire third of Tajikistan that China exchanged for a crumb of mountain is still on Taiwan's hit list, as is a section of Afghanistan's strange tumor, the Wakhan Corridor. Some funky borders at Kazakhstan and Pakistan that got cleared up in the 90s and 60s respectively, a mountain in Kyrgyzstan that got split in 99, an island that got ceded to the USSR by the Imperial Japanese in the 30s when they held Manchuria, which, oddly enough, the PRC doesn't seem to care about when they're usually all about that "we coughed on this land 80 years ago, now give it back" train, and a big old island to the west of that, which was split between Russia and China in 2005. I know you haven't been counting, so I want you to take a wild guess at how many countries Taiwan's border claims intersect with. Go on, guess. You're wrong. It's 18, not counting Tibet and Xinjiang. That's 18 UN-recognized countries that Taiwan's ready to throw down with at a moment's notice, and I kinda have to respect a country that approaches international diplomacy the same way a siege player approaches a woman. That brings us to the last two, by far the most interesting two territories that Taiwan claims. I could do an entire video on either of these because one is an extremely unique Russian republic and the other is one of the most violent border disputes in Chinese history. If you've made it this far, here's the light at the end of the tunnel. Tuva and the 64 villages. Tuva is a weird, fascinating place. It was on the absolute outermost reaches of the Qing dynasty's claims, bordering only Outer Mongolia, which is funny because Taiwan has stopped including Outer Mongolia on its maps, but still includes Tuva for some fucking reason, so there's just this island of land that Taiwan puts on all its official maps, and that's very funny to me. It's a very sparsely populated Buddhist shamanist republic ruled by a man named the Great Kharal and has every biome on Earth on it except for one. It's also got the lowest human development index in Russia, not because it's underdeveloped, but because the Tuvans are a somewhat nomadic people and a lot of the population vibe in yurts. A lot of the population also don't give a shit about borders and fuck off to China or Mongolia whenever they want. They also make wishes every morning by sprinkling milk on the ground in a circle around them. That last part might be fake according to Wikipedia, but fuck, it sounds real. This place is wild. Tuva became independent alongside Mongolia, but soon became a base for the Red Army during the Russian Revolution. Once the Red Army left, Tuva breathed a sigh of relief, only for them to come back a decade later and slowly Crimea the bitch. They remained mostly autonomous within the Union and became a Russian republic when it went under. Despite all of this, Taiwan claims it as its own. Tuvans can even apply for passports in Taiwan, which they could also do in Russia, Mongolia, and China, given the nomadic nature of the Tuvan people. I don't know about you, but if a man walked up to me with 4 passports, I'd immediately submit to his power because he's a fucking main character. Taiwan, however, being the generous government that they are, have banned Tuvans from living in Taiwan. They cared enough to ban them, but not enough to recognize that they're 2 countries apart from anywhere that Taiwan could even come remotely close to claiming as their own territory. Nice. The 64 villages on the east side of the river are, in fact, 64 villages that are on the east side of the Amur River. These were mostly Chinese and Manchu villages, but they lied within Russian territory. In the 1850s, Russia slid over to the Qing dynasty and gave them $20 and a hamburger to fuck off, to which they said no. Russia came back with 2 hamburgers and the Qing's fortitude broke instantly, but they made Russia promise to pretty please let the villagers do what they want and that they just have the territory. Naturally, Russia respected the rights of the native Manchu and Chinese villagers for about 10 minutes, then the Boxer Rebellion hit. The Boxer Rebellion was a shit show where the Chinese told the missionaries in China to please get out and stop selling crack, and the missionaries responded by calling every nation in existence to slaughter as many Chinese people as possible. Now China and Russia were at war, and China was hitting the nearby town of Blagoveshchensk, and Russia had a lot of Chinese people just sitting around in their territory. So they killed 15,000 of them. China was mad, very mad. That's about 5 9/11s, enough that one Russian soldier said that he could have walked across the river on a bridge made of corpses, so the Chinese got to work. The local bandits joined up with the Japanese of all people to beat the shit out of the Russians and staged a long and drawn-out guerrilla war against the Russians in the area. I'm not a fan of this season of Japan, but I can't deny that Russia deserved the ass clap they got here, and the Chinese helped them do it, even as Japan raped and pillaged their own country. In 1991, China agreed that the villages were on the Russian side of the border and ceded them formally. Taiwan didn't agree, but you already knew that. So yeah, that's all 18 countries standing in the way of Taiwanese statehood. In practice, these claims amount to literally nothing, but it's fun to look at just how stupid the paperwork is. This was a long one, and I think I'm due for something a bit more simple. Next time we're talking about something I'm sure I'm going to be intimately familiar with in 40 years or so. Hello, this is me way after the fact of way after the initial recording, and I'm just doing a little unscripted bit. Sorry that this video took so long to get out. I kind of had a hellish finals week, which spiraled into several weeks, and then a lot of personal shit to handle in real life, so it's been a bad time, but I have some time now to finish it up. As time of recording, I am 2/3 done with the drawings for this episode, so should be coming out a couple days for me, the weekend for you guys probably. Um, Next episode shouldn't take as long. I'm gonna have shitty internet for a while, but that's all I really have to say. Thanks for sticking with me. If you would subscribe and share it around, that'd mean a lot, because that's cool. I would like more people to see my videos. So, that's all. I'm probably not going to do too many more end card type things like this. Just wanted to let you know where I'm at and why this video took so long to get out.